Hela hung as a blood-red planet against a furnace of smoke and embers. A bold caption named the world Hela in stark red lettering. Flames and ash swirled around the globe, leaving dark scorched patterns. Thin white streaks cut across the heat and smoke. Text declared that blood and battles filled the place without further detail. Small yellow sparks fell through the burning air. At the panel base, a jagged blue silhouette rose against the inferno. The frame held the planet in silhouette in stark contrast and threat. Hela remained a crimson world that blistered under ash and falling sparks. A titanic dragon threatened from above, its teeth bared and eyes burning. Orc warriors streamed forward in ragged ranks, their skin marked by scars. One massive orc wore skulls on a cord, and blood streaked his chest. They brandished crude blades and axes, while a smaller contingent raised poles. Hot embers and fractured earth framed their advance, while red eyes watched from shadow. A caption declared the land as attached to a part of hell. Hela remained a blistered crimson world, with ash falling and sparks in the wind. A titanic dragon circled above the field with teeth bared and eyes burning. Orc warriors streamed forward in ragged ranks, their skin marked by scars. One massive orc wore skulls on a cord and bore a blood-streaked chest. They brandished crude blades and raised polearms, while embers and fractured earth framed their advance. A caption declared the land attached to a part of hell below. In the foreground, Unknown watched armored soldiers face a shattered sky, and then realized he had been summoned here by force against his will. Hela's blistered world still rained ash as the dragon circled above. Orc ranks streamed forward through embers and fractured ground. Armored soldiers held lines beneath the shattered sky. Unknown had been summoned and stood bloodied on the field. He knelt and gripped a sword, hands slick with fresh blood. A caption warned that only killing or dying would survive. A distant shout urged him not to give up. He raised the blade until it split the ember light, eyes hard. Hela's ash-choked sky still smoldered as Unknown bared his teeth and screamed the command to charge. Blood streaked across his cheek and armor while he gripped a bloodied sword with both hands. Armored soldiers surged behind him, a comrade shaping crackling energy in his palm. The line smashed into enemy ranks beneath flares and falling embers. Unknown drove forward, blade cutting through heat and chaos. In the following beat, an unseen blow struck his body, and he folded with a pained grimace. The battlefield continued to howl under red light and smoke. After an unseen blow had felled him, Unknown still drove his sword downward into a figure at his feet, and blood burst against the ruined street. Flames licked the surrounding buildings and threw hot light across bent metal and shattered glass. Unknown's eyes flared red as shock and fury replaced pain, and he stared toward the burning horizon. A soldier behind him froze, grime streaking his face, sweat standing on his brow as the blast rolled past. The front line remained a storm of heat, smoke, and raw noise beneath the red sky. Fire had consumed the street and cast long shadows as a horned demon rose from the blaze. Unknown planted his feet and held his bloodied sword before him, eyes flaring red with shock and fury. The demon loomed, teeth bared, heat washing the ruined ground. Unknown did not falter. He tightened his grip and faced the beast while embers swirled around them. Blood stained the blade and slicked the cobbles. The scene held as a brutal pause before the next clash, flames reflecting in Unknown's determined gaze. Unknown lunged and leapt onto the demon amid a hurricane of heat and embers. He shouted, sword raised, and struck from above with his grim intent. The demon reared, horns flashing, and its bulk twisted under the assault. Flames licked the rubble while embers drifted and littered the black air. Blood gleamed on the blade and streaked the cobbles beneath their feet. Unknown held fast despite the thrash and kept aiming for the head. The ruined street held its breath as their collision readied the next blow. After the clash, Unknown knelt amid embers and wreckage, blood soaking his coat and blade. The demon's head lay severed on the cracked cobbles, fire licking the open wound and scattering ash. The force of the fight threw Unknown backward across the street, and he hit the ground hard, ribs and hands slick with blood. He rolled, breath stuttering, while the ruined lane echoed with silence and distant crackle. A distant voice or memory called his name, Kang Hyuk, and a stark warning appeared: the paradise of death will be your resting place. After the clash, Unknown collapsed amid embers and wreckage, blood darkening his coat and blade. The demon's severed head lay on cracked cobbles, while fire licked the open wound. Unknown hit the ground hard, breath shallow and hands slick with blood. The ruined lane fell silent except for distant crackle and falling ash. A voice called Kang Hyuk, and a stark warning appeared in his head. The paradise of death will be your resting place, the warning intoned in his mind. He looked up through rain and crumbling masonry, eyes flaring a hard red. Shock cut through him as sweat beaded on his temple. Unknown had collapsed amid embers and wreckage, while the demon lay severed nearby. Ash had fallen through the ruined lane, and silence had settled. A voice had warned Kang Hyuk that the paradise of death awaited him. He felt shock and sweat on his temple as he looked up. Dark vapor began to rise from his palms and stain the air. His eyes flared a hard red, and he stared at his hands in disbelief. The warning replayed in his head as fear and a strange power met. Kang Hyuk had stood amid ash and wreckage after the battle and listened to the voice in his head. Embers still drifted, while the severed demon lay nearby. Sweat tracked down his temple as a warning about the paradise of death replayed. Dark vapor rose from his palms and stained the air above him. His eyes flared an unnatural red, and he stared at his trembling hands in disbelief. Fear and a strange power had met inside him and held his attention. Kang Hyuk had stood alone amid ash and wreckage after the battle's end. A voice had spoken inside him, while dark vapor rose from his palms. His eyes flared red as fear, and strange power met inside him. Then the smoke revealed shapes at ground level, skulls with red eyes. They peered up through the smoke and remained utterly silent and unmoving. Kang Hyuk could not tell if they were corpses or summoned spirits. He only knew that he still did not understand what had happened. The uncertainty settled over him and froze his thoughts and motion completely. Kang Hyuk had stood amid ash and wreckage, smoke curling around motionless skulls. A voice had spoken inside him, and his palms had leaked dark vapor. His eyes had flared red, while the skulls watched with burning red sockets. He felt steady satisfaction at controlling those he had killed. He clenched his fist and then extended his hand as energy gathered. Purple light traced his fingers, and the dead seemed ready at his will. He thought mastering stronger enemies would widen his command, but uncertainty remained. He still did not understand the source or the cost of the power. Kang Hyuk had stood amid ash and wreckage, while dark vapor seeped from his palms. He clenched, then opened his hand, as faint purple light followed his fingers. Armored soldiers pushed forward with spears and shields, while crystals of energy spun above. Fire blazed and lightning cracked as the living launched their coordinated attack. Below them skeletons rose, their eye sockets glowing a steady red as bones assembled. A huge skull appeared and the dead swelled his ranks, proving the army's growth. He felt control and worried about the unknown cost of commanding more souls. Kang Hyuk had watched the dead assemble into a disciplined force under a great skull. Armored skeletons took up swords, while hooded figures cast cold light from their hands. A dog-like war beast prowled the front lines, and red eyes gleamed from beneath hoods. Lightning laced the scorched ground, and sparks drifted through the air. He realized then that the opponents he faced in Hela were human beings reanimated to fight. The discovery deepened his unease about the cost of commanding more souls and the unknown price to come. Kang Hyuk stepped forward and faced the front lines with a steady expression. A masked striker crouched beside him, fists clenched and ready for attack. Above them, a hooded woman raised a staff and traced glowing sigils in the air. Runes spun and scattered colored sparks across their faces and lingered briefly. Kang Hyuk's hand rested on his sword as he weighed the enemy's nature. He remembered the assembled dead and the cost of commanding more souls. Resolve tightened his jaw as the reanimated soldiers advanced steadily toward them. Kang Hyuk studied the pendant as yellow sparks fell across his tunic. A caption explained that each opponent possessed completely different abilities. He and the armored soldier stared at a blood-red plain and tensed. They had survived 10 years fighting enemies with transcendental powers. Their faces tightened as energy began to coil on the ground. Pink lightning laced toward a rising blue vortex of churning light. The vortex roared and spat sparks while the two men prepared to move. Kang Hyuk's hand rested on his sword as he assessed the threat. Kang Hyuk found a dimensional gate he intended to use for his younger brother. He and the armored soldier stood on a blood-red plain and watched a blue vortex churn overhead. Energy coiled along the ground and pink lightning laced toward the rising portal. Sparks drifted around them as the narrator explained the gate's purpose in a caption. The soldier looked hopeful, while Kang Hyuk assessed the opening with his hand near his sword. They braced themselves to move through the gate if needed. Kang Hyuk stood close and offered to go through the gate together with him. He told his brother that this was all the help he could give. The brother smiled as though he understood, while Kang Hyuk kept his silence. Kang Hyuk recalled the same smile from when he was first summoned to Hela. He also remembered living on Earth and how that warmth had always remained between them. 6 years had passed since his brother returned home, and nothing had altered that bond. Kang Hyuk then accepted what he had become, the ultimate necromancer bearing the cost alone. Kang Hyuk stood alone at the center of a burned battlefield, his cape sweeping behind him. Flames licked scattered corpses and skeletal ranks rose obediently at his command. He had become the one who controlled death and inspired fear across realms. Necromancers bent to that grim reputation and treated him with wary respect. Swords and broken staves protruded from the ground as reminders of lives he ended. He accepted the burden of rulership over the dead and bore it alone. Silence followed him under a blood-red sky while flames spat restless embers. Kang Hyuk remained alone at the center of a charred battlefield, his cape trailing behind him. Flames licked fractured remains while darkness pooled below the frame. He had become the one who controlled death and who inspired fear across realms. Necromancers treated him with wary respect whenever they approached or stayed away. He refused to return to Earth and chose to live within that hellscape. He accepted the burden of ruling the dead and bore it without comfort. Silence followed beneath a blood-red sky while embers drifted and whispered softly. Blood pooled across the ground as hands broke its surface and grasped outward. The hands were smeared with gore and moved with deliberate purpose toward the surface. They rose from a necromantic pool that answered Kang Hyuk's silent will. Kang Hyuk stood beneath the blood-red sky in battered armor and a cape. His face showed no comfort, and his shoulders held the burden of death. Silence stretched while embers drifted and the red water lapped at bones. He watched the hands answer and accepted that this was his realm. Kang Hyuk's necromantic hands had clawed upward from the black blood pool. The sky above bled red while the water lapped at broken bones. Beyond the pool, a shattered city loomed under the title blazing in the sky. On a tall throne, a wrapped skeleton sat with empty sockets and a cape. A hooded figure stood before the dais and watched the ruler's stilled hands. Silence held the palace as ash drifted and the blood answered its master. Kang Hyuk accepted the ruin as his dominion without a single word. Kang Hyuk had risen from the blooded pool and sat motionless on the throne as ash drifted. A hooded skeleton glided forward beneath a sickly light, staff topped with a skull. The figure named himself Desmond Rodrich and declared urgent news to the ruler. A carved nameplate read Spirit of Death, confirming his office and intent. Kang Hyuk turned his head and ordered him to speak with a cold word. The spirit's red eyes burned as green mist curled along the cavern walls and silence held. Kang Hyuk rose from the blooded pool and sat motionless upon the throne as ash drifted. A hooded skeleton glided forward beneath a sickly light and spoke with formal cadence. He named himself Desmond Rodrich and declared that Kang Hyuk's brother had died. A carved nameplate confirmed his office as Spirit of Death and Intent. Green mist curled along the cavern walls as the spirit's red eyes burned. Without warning, the throne released a sudden surge of spectral power into the air. Blue electricity lanced outward and struck the cloaked figure who knelt before Kang Hyuk. Debris scattered and sound tore the silence, while the ruler remained still and watchful. Kang Hyuk remained on the throne as a violent surge of blue electricity exploded outward. It struck the cloaked figure kneeling before him, and debris tore the floor apart. Kang Hyuk spoke the name Desmond Rodrich, and the skeleton answered with obedient cadence. Black mist rose around the cloaked skeleton and formed a tall shadow behind him. The Lord demanded clearer details, and the voice below obeyed with a short reply. The final panel revealed a dark silhouette listening from below the throne. Kang Hyuk remained on the throne as blue electricity exploded outward and struck the kneeling figure. Debris tore the floor, and the cloaked skeleton answered Kang Hyuk's command with steady cadence. Black mist rose and gathered into a tall shadow behind the obedient skeleton. A dark armored figure emerged from below the throne and faced the Lord silently. Its face lay hidden, yet red eyes burned, and ribbed armor resembled exposed bone. The hall fell silent as Kang Hyuk awaited the final reply from the shadow. Kang Hyuk demanded specifics about his brother's death and waited without flinching. A dark armored silhouette answered with burning red eyes as the skull-faced spirit spoke. Desmond Rodrich identified himself as Duke of Death and paid respect to Hela. He said he had monitored the brother's soul after its return to Earth. The spirit displayed the soul trapped amid broken crystal shards and traced its tether. Desmond then confirmed the connection to Kang Hyuk had been severed and could not be restored. Kang Hyuk listened while shadow and mist filled the hall. Kang Hyuk demanded proof and did not flinch. Desmond Rodrich answered and obeyed with a single solemn phrase. Blue light and cold filled the hall as a translucent male form materialized. It hovered among fractured crystal shards that glowed with inner frost. The skull-faced spirit lowered a bony hand and summoned concentric blue rings. Chains of spectral gold coiled around the apparition and traced an unseen tether. Kang Hyuk watched without moving as the evidence unfolded before him. Silence settled over the hall while rain-like motes fell through the light. Kang Hyuk demanded proof and did not flinch as Desmond Rodrich answered with a single solemn phrase. Cold blue light filled the hall while a translucent male form materialized among fractured crystal shards. The skull-faced spirit lowered a bony hand and summoned concentric rings and spectral gold chains that traced an unseen tether. A caption warned that all memories would return to those who looked into the eyes of death. Kang Hyuk noted the figure looked unchanged from 6 years earlier. The spirit reached out and struck with a memory-claiming gaze as rain-like motes fell through the light. Earlier, Kang Hyuk had demanded proof and had not flinched when Desmond Rodrich answered with a solemn phrase. A cold light and memory-claiming gaze had filled the hall before this moment. Now 2 men stood and celebrated, while one raised a bloodied hand and smiled. They taunted that even the world's strongest returner could not beat them alone. They warned that failing to grasp one's situation would leave a strong man isolated and dead. Kang Min lay motionless and bleeding as their leader declared that with him killed their era would begin. A final whisper invoked the brothers' return and pointed the threat at Kang Hyuk. After the hall fell silent, the leader settled into his seat and smiled. Red light caught his eyes as he lifted a bloodied hand with slow amusement. A hooded figure bowed in shadow and announced they had measured human souls on Earth. The men laughed and positioned their victory as the start of their era. They taunted that no lone returner could stop them. Kang Hyuk's threat hung unanswered while Kang Min lay motionless. The room's calm hardened into a warning aimed squarely at him. After the hall fell silent, the leader settled into his seat and smiled. Red light glinted in his eyes as he raised a bloodied hand slowly. A hooded figure bowed and announced they had measured human souls on Earth. The men laughed and framed their victory as the start of their era. They taunted that no lone returner could stop them. Kang Hyuk's threat went unanswered while Kang Min lay motionless on the floor. Outside the room, a voice revealed the test results and named Kang Min's strength. The verdict declared Kang Min possessed the strongest power on Earth. The announcement hardened the room's calm into a clear warning directed at Kang Hyuk. After the hall fell silent, the leader settled and smiled with blood on his hand. The hooded unknown announced they had measured human souls and read the results. They named Kang Min the strongest power on Earth, and the men laughed. A speaker then noted there were others who nearly matched Kang Min's strength. 2 elite fighters stepped forward beside the group to reinforce that claim. Their quiet presence hardened the room's calm into an explicit warning for Kang Hyuk. Kang Min remained motionless on the floor while the men savored their victory. After the hall fell silent, the skull-robed leader ordered a new mission to Earth. The robed spirit instructed his subordinate to summon the 5 nobles and ensure their response. He named those nobles as ancient monsters who once dominated Hela and said their return would reshape the world. Below him 3 summoned figures stood waiting, a masked warrior, a red-haired woman, and a blue-haired attendant. Kang Hyuk watched from the foreground with cold red eyes as the order set the next confrontation in motion. The skull-robed leader confirmed the plan to send nobles to Earth and reshape the world. He instructed his subordinate Desmond Rodrich to remain and defend Hela's penance palace. Kang Hyuk stood at the threshold with cold red eyes and a steady posture. He warned moving alone was dangerous, but offered to call for help if needed. He also said he could not take everyone and expected them to understand. Desmond replied he would obey and stay to guard the palace in his stead.